so you can know God. That's one of the great things about the doctrine of God. You can know Him. These are things you can teach your people. These are things that you, and by the way, the reason that I'm teaching you this doctrine is to make your foundation stronger so that you can face the error that's out there, so that you can tell the difference between what is true about God and biblical and what is not. But also so that you can go back to your church and you can teach your people these things, so that your people can know these things. You want your people to know who God is and how He operates in their lives. And you can teach them these things. All right, now I'm about to stretch you in a big way, okay? So don't go to sleep. You better wake up or you're going to miss it. And you better gear up in your mind because you're going to have to think through these things, all right? Because I want to talk to you about two very important concepts about who God is. And that is the immanence and the transcendence of God. The immanence and transcendence of God. Now, in your notebook, that's number 4. The Bible's teaching regarding God's relationship to His creation is unique in the philosophies of the world. Let me say that again. What the Bible teaches us about who God is and how He relates to His creation is unique. There's not another philosophy like the biblical philosophy. So what I want to do is I want to just kind of expose you to some philosophical ideas. There are 4 basic philosophical ideas when it comes to God. Now, there are many philosophical ideas out there, but these 4 are basic when it comes to the idea of who is God, or how does the world operate? Where are we? What is this purpose or reason for existence that we have? So there are 4 basic ones. Number 1 is the philosophy of materialism. And materialism says, by the way, this is the most common philosophy out there. It denies the existence of God altogether. And materialism says that the material universe is all there is. So in other words, it's saying what I can see, feel, smell, touch, hear, that's all there is. If I cannot see it, hear it, taste it, touch it, if I cannot understand it, comprehend it, then it must not exist. And so I've illustrated it. You look in your book there, you see that circle. The circle stands for everything that is, all of creation. And so you see inside that circle the universe. That means, well, all there is the universe, okay? So materialism says only what exists, or the material universe, that is all that exists. That's all that's there. Okay? Now, the second philosophy is the philosophy of pantheism. Now, pantheism, this word comes from 2 words. The first word is pan. That means all. And then theos, meaning God. So literally this word means all things are God. Everything is God. Pantheism is the idea that the whole universe is God or is part of God. In this philosophy, the ultimate goal is for all individuals to blend in with the universe and become more and more united with it. Pantheism devalues personal identity and rejects the idea that God himself is a personal God. He has a personal identity. There's no personal relationship with God. Only an ultimate merging into one big mass consciousness. This is pantheism. Very prevalent in Asia, in the East. Pantheism. Now, and you see the circle there. The circle is all that exists, right? And then you look in there and see that the word God. So, God is the material universe, and the material universe is God. That's pantheism. Okay? Perhaps some of your ancient tribal religions might have some semblance of pantheism in it, with a multiplicity of gods, many gods, and with nature being God. So that is kind of a pantheistic outlook. So that's one of the philosophies. The third one that I have listed here is called dualism. Dualism, the word dual meaning more than or two. Dualism is the idea that both God and the material universe have eternally existed side by side. Thus, there are two ultimate forces in the universe, God and matter. Now, this has been explained or has been manifested in several different ways. There is like good and evil existing together, or right and wrong, or God and the universe, or God and matter. So you see, and look at the illustration there. You have the circle of God going in this direction, and you have the universe going alongside it. So it's like two tracks on a railroad track, and they're running parallel. But that's as far as they get. There's no coming together. They're running parallel with each other. Only very rarely in this philosophy, very rarely do they intersect. And then when they do, they will intersect and then get back on their individual track. Am I making sense to you? Are you getting this? You need to think this through. This philosophy suggests that there is an eternal conflict between God and the evil aspects of the universe, and the outcome is always in doubt. So that's how they intersect. Here you have God and you have the universe, good and evil, and they're going along side by side, and then every once in a while there is an intersection. That's where they come together, they do battle. But then there's no ultimate winner. They go back to this parallelism, this going on parallel tracks. So they may intersect, but there's never a victory. The victory over one or the other is always in doubt. This philosophy denies God's ultimate lordship over creation. It denies that God willed this creation into being. and it denies that God uses anything in this creation for His will and purpose. There is a lot of dualistic philosophy and thought in our popular culture today. This eternal battle between good and evil. You see it in a lot of movies and a lot of books that are written, fantasy books, a lot of games that are played, video games. It is this dualism. It's good versus evil, and there's never really any clear winner when the conflict comes. Then you have the philosophy of deism. This is the word, this I think it's Latin, Dei, meaning God, the Latin word for God. And deism says that God is God, but He's not directly involved in creation. You see it in the illustration. Here you have God, and here you have creation, and there's nothing that connects them. They're separate. Deism says that God created the universe and is far greater than the universe, but deism denies that God is ever directly involved in the universe. He's not even, according to deism, He's not even interested in His creation. Deism looks at God as a cosmic clock maker. And He has made a clock called creation. And He's wound up that clock and set it out there in space, in the universe, and it's just winding down on its own. And one day it'll wind down and disappear, and God won't care. I say here, many Christians become practical deists when they live without any thought of who God is in their lives every day. There are many believers who live every day of their lives. They don't pray, they don't read the Bible, they don't think about, when they come to a decision, well, what does God want for me? When they come to encounter something, watching something on TV or a movie or going someplace, they never think, well, what does God say about this? They make a claim for Christianity, but then they move on and live their lives as though God doesn't even exist. So they become practical deists. Do you understand what I'm saying? All right, so those are four very common philosophical ideas when it comes to God and who God is. But now I want to talk about a fifth one. This is the one that we're here for. And that is the philosophy of Biblicism. Biblicism refers to a philosophy that is derived from and based on the truth of Scripture. The Bible teaches that God's relationship to His creation is personal, authoritative, and compassionate. He is distinct from creation and infinitely above creation, and yet He is involved with creation in every way. He rules over His creation, yet He loves it and shows compassion for it. Look at the illustration. You have God. Then you have creation where? Alongside God? Above God? Where? Below Him. So that illustrates the fact that God is infinitely above His creation. He is different. He is sovereign. And creation is below. But then look, where is the arrow coming from? Coming from God to creation. Why is there no arrow going from creation to God? Because creation, we as creatures cannot get to God. Our sin has prevented us from ever getting to God. God had to come to us. And so this illustrates the biblical view of who God is and how He interacts with His creation. He created. He is absolutely above and sovereign, and yet He came to us. He loves us. He wants a relationship with us and makes the way for that relationship to be. That is a biblical view, a biblical philosophy. God is sovereign above His creation and yet involved in every aspect of it. These ideas comprise those two concepts that I talked about. These are theological concepts, and they have great doctrinal significance for us. Remember what I said? Immanence and transcendence. So, let's talk about those two words now, okay? Do we have this in our minds? Do you have those philosophical ideas in your mind? Those philosophical illustrations? Do you have them in your mind? So you've got all kinds. You've got just God and nothing else. You've got God and creation, but never having anything to do with each other. You've got creation being God itself. I mean, you've just got these ideas. So what does all that have to do with immanence and transcendence? Keep all that in mind and listen to this. Immanence means that God is present and active within His creation and the human race, both the lost and the saved. Now look back or think back on all of those illustrations. Is there any illustration, any philosophy that gives us the immanence of God except the biblical philosophy? No. You can't find one where God is actively involved with His creation. As an immanent God, immanence means He is not some abstract deity that's removed from and disinterested in His creation. He's not just somewhere out there, this deity, this God that we can't really know. Now that's true about the gods that your ancestors worship, isn't it? Am I right about that? In the African tribal religions, is there any God that you could know personally? Is there any God that would be involved in your life? Is there any God that, involved in your life except to punish you or to kill you? No. So this is showing us that only the biblical philosophy that our philosophy, our religion, our faith is the only faith that has a God who is personal to those who follow Him. Ours is the only faith that has a God who wants a relationship with those who follow Him, who wants to be involved in their lives, who wants them to know Him and who knows them. This is imminence. Listen, this is a theological concept that you need to understand as a pastor. The imminence of God, the nearness of God, the closeness of God, the fact that God, and listen, you'll see how this fits in just a minute, but the fact that God came to His creation. Okay? The Bible is the story of God's involvement with His creation, and particularly with the people in it. Imminence also means that God does much of His work through natural means. God's involvement in nature with His creation means that He uses His creation to bring about His purpose. He'll use unbelieving human beings. He'll use nature. He'll use technology. He'll use human skill and learning. Look at these examples. In Isaiah 44 and verse 28, God calls Cyrus, the king of Babylon, His shepherd. Think about that. The king of Babylon, yet God uses him as a shepherd. He calls him a shepherd. In Isaiah 45 verse 1, He calls Cyrus His anointed. God refers to Nebuchadnezzar as His servant 3 different times in Jeremiah. Several times in the Old Testament, it says that God uses nations like Assyria and Egypt to bring chastening upon disobedient Israel. So God, imminence, not only means that God is near, but it means that God uses natural means, the means of His creation, to bring about His will and purpose. So what are examples of God's imminence in Scripture? Job 12 and verse 10. God, in whose hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. In His hand. Psalm 139 and verse 7 through 10. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in hell, you're there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. God is imminent. He's present. He's involved. Acts chapter 17, verses 25 and 28. God gives to all life, breath, and all things, for in Him we live and move and have our being. In Him we live and move and have our being. Colossians 1:17. In Him all things consist. Hebrews 1 and verse 3. God is continually upholding all things by the word of His power. So do you understand the concept of God's imminence? That is His nearness, His involvement with His creation. Do you understand that? I'm telling you, this is going to come, if you'll think this through and let that grip you, in just a minute, we're going to look at some things that's going to make you want to shout about this, about who God is. So His imminence.